Welcome everyone back to the Calicon 2022 here in Sherbrooke at the Calimacil workshop. We are here for the second panel of the day. I am Patricia Favreau. I'm going to be hosting the panel, and we're here with Raquel Skellington.
Hi.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little?
Yeah, hi everybody. I am Raquel Skellington. I'm a professional LARPer, and I travel the world playing pretend.
And we also have Risa, who also contributes to Dragonfest.
Yes, I am Risa. I live in Canada now, come from Germany, organize the Drachenfest in Germany, and help organize the Drachenfest in the US.
She's very integral. We would fall apart without her.
And today we're going to be talking about a little bit more the back end of LARPs, the realities that help mold what the game becomes, and the rules that help players navigate it properly, and everybody staying safe and whatnot. So to start off with, weapons. Weapons are integral to LARPs, to most LARPs anyways. Weapons come in so many different types. I mean, so many people started with boffer weapons.
True.
Now we have so many options. We have latex weapons, we have foam molded weapons. They come in different hardnesses. What has been your experience in that, like in terms of the LARPs that you've been to or organized?
Well, I guess I'll start. Actually, my first weapon I ever used at LARP was a Calimacil. So like 10 years ago, going on 11, it was like the game that I went to actually was trying to phase out boffers, because in the US, like especially with a lot of the battle games that we have, like boffers have unfortunately now kind of gotten like a bad name. So to kind of like standardize everything, a lot of the LARPs that I went to and still go to prefer having like foam weapons and latex weapons over just like a casually made boffer. They're usually also safer, so nobody gets like a rod to the face or anything like that. But yeah, my experience has been actually like pretty varied. I mean, I've also seen some like incredible player-made foam weapons and boffer weapons. It's a good variation. I mean, like across the world.
And how about for instance, like in Germany, like in terms of weapon hardness and expectations of visual expectations, basically?
Well, basically, I can only speak for Germany because, like, North America was a Damarun, and Drachenfest US, but not like many other LARPs. So, but we use mostly like latex. Like when I started LARP 2003, we used latex weapons because there wasn't that much foam at that moment. And now mostly we are using like foam weapons in Germany with like a polyurethane handle, or like Calimacil weapons, because you really want to be immersed in the game in Germany, and it's all about the theatrics and the role play. And so they most want like these as realistic as possible, like either authentic realistic or fantasy realistic weapons, and we don't use boffers in Germany.
And in Quebec, a lot of the LARPs that I've been to at any rate, when I first started, there were more boffer weapons that could be found. Nowadays, the ones that I go to have a lot less. I know they still exist, but yeah, like slowly but surely. I guess there's a mix of just the player base, a lot of us getting older and having more money to be able to spend, so that probably helps. But yeah, in terms of like weapon hardness, in Germany, like, do you guys test in terms of like the weapon hardness and things like that, or do you have specific rules, or maybe a bit of both, to accommodate so that players can stay safe?
Well, on the Drachenfest, it's like we don't test the weapons for them, but we give them the rules that it should be like soft enough so you don't like break a bone when you hit somebody. You're also supposed to break your hits, but accidents can happen. And on like most little LARPs that I go to as a player, they mostly test the weapons that the foam is like soft enough and not too soft, because then you can feel the core if somebody hits like too hard. So like Calimacil is a good weapon, Wyvern is a good weapon if you go with buying a weapon, and yeah.
I know we've had some people, for instance, with the Calimacil weapons, really like the more tapered edges now, like the more modern, the more recent blades that we've had. A lot of them are more tapered. Some people don't like them as much because they feel that they're sharper. what's been your experience? Have you guys heard that kind of thing? Do you have a personal preference?
I like the more thinner edges because it looks more realistic.
Yeah.
Most Germans actually like the thinner edges. Like Calimacil was mostly in Germany because it would have these rounded edges. They used it, but when like Wyvern brought out the thinner edges blade and not the latex blade anymore, a lot of people liked that and wanted to actually combine the handle of the Calimacil weapon with the blade of the Wyvern.
So
because
a lot of people are pretty happy with it.
yeah. And what I noticed is that in America or North America, most people like when Wyvern Crafts get orders, they want the classic blade that they have, so they like the rounded edges because they feel safer.
Yep, that would actually, I was about to say, it's kind of like 50-50. So it depends on what's more important. I've seen like at the LARP, if people are looking more for like aesthetic, they'll go for like that thinner edge. But if it's more of like a game where it's just like constant combat and it's like not necessarily as roleplay focused, rounded edges are more popular.
It's interesting because, for instance, like with the rounded edges, we've noticed that a lot of first-time buyers, with Calimacil at any rate, a lot of first-time buyers will tend to go towards the less tapered ones, with the exception of our licensed products, which have the wow factor of being like, for instance, a Witcher product or that type of thing. But in terms of our generic weapons, first-time buyers often go towards the less tapered, the less sharp ones.
It's probably because it seems safer too, like to them, especially as a new player. Maybe they don't want to feel like they could actually hurt or mess up anybody. I think that's how I would think.
Because they don't know how to break their hits maybe, and think it's safer for the other person to take like the rounded edges instead of the like thinner ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another aspect, I touched on it very quickly, in terms of rules, combat rules. Here in Quebec, it'll vary on the different types of events. For instance, like because in terms of their combat rules, they don't have very many combat rules in terms of like, well, you can hit pretty much wherever. Right. It's up to each person to make sure that they are properly geared to take whatever hits. I believe that one of the ways that one of the rules that they put in was that you could basically do like the taps, and that counted as a hit, which meant that it maybe prevented some people from like swinging like crazy. Do you have a preference, or like for Drachenfest in Germany, is it similar to the Drachenfest in the US in terms of like hitting, in terms of like head, neck, hands, avoiding those areas, things like that?
You avoid those areas, like accidents can happen. The big events mostly don't let you hit on the head because it's also not as controllable as like little events where you only have like 300, 400 people. Time of Legends is a smaller event from the Drachenfest. It's like the prequel. There you're allowed to hit on the head when you wear a helmet. So if you go into battle with a helmet, it could happen that you get a hit on your head. But also people just watch out. And you're supposed to break your hit, like really just so it ends up as a tap.
So yeah, and like, well, by breaking your hit, you mean basically just controlling your hit, not swinging full force.
Pull your swings is like the term
pull your swing,
in the US. And like, honestly, you'll never find a LARP that'll let you do headshots in the US. It's just like, we don't have the health insurance for that, so we just don't. Usually, nothing below the belt and nothing on the head. And I would say that the US has kind of taken a massive shift away from like the classic boffer combat where people are just like tap, 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 like 3-3-3 or where they're calling numbers and stuff like that. That's like, there are definitely still LARPs out there that are doing that, but it's been like phased out, and theatrical combat and like theatrical focus combat has kind of been the new wave of doing things where it's all about like the show and not necessarily the force behind the swing, but the show behind the swing, making it interesting not just to fight, but for people to watch.
And moving a little bit away from that subject, I'm curious, since you go to LARPs all over the world, I'm curious as to, is there anything that comes to mind of like rules that you've never seen anywhere else, or maybe rules that it turns out that everybody has, but nobody knows that everybody has?
There's definitely a lot of those, like a lot of rules that everybody has that nobody thinks everybody has, which is like, you know, pulling your swings, you know, being conscious of your fellow player, you know, not fighting aggressively when you're wearing like something with narrow vision, like if you're a monster or something like that. But I was just in Israel a couple weeks ago, and they really do like theatrical combat over there. Like that's it. That's like what those guys do.
Wow.
But they have really interesting thought out rules around like grappling and how like intimate the contact. It's like basically like WWE. It's like it's like really intense like stage fighting.
I know in Quebec, like grappling, you don't see that very much in LARPs, and it's mostly between people that already know each other.
Yeah,
because,
no, they were going
there's
at
like
it.
a whole consent thing and just safety issue as well. So it's interesting that they have like rules about grappling that are not just don't grapple.
Well, in the specific like LARP that I went to, most of the people that were doing the combat were gladiators. So there was already kind of like, hey, if you're going to be a gladiator, here are like the baseline levels for like consent and contact in fighting. And then they trained. They trained for like weeks, and it's actually kind of like a normal thing over there where like before a major event, like people will train before they fight at the LARP so that they can give a good performance, because it's all about the theatrics. So which like major kudos to them out there in Israel, because like we could take something from that. We could definitely learn from that.
That's very cool, because one event that I personally go to is a fully role-play event. There's no combat that's allowed there, except if it has been pre-planned and pre-approved. And yeah, for instance, before the pandemic, so a few years ago, there was one duel that took place between one woman who does HEMA, so historical combat, and she trained the other player. They practiced ahead of time so that they were able to actually do historically accurate or close to moves in game in front of everybody, but entirely theatrically. And so it was pre-planned who was going to lose and everything.
Right.
And do you have any experience with that type of thing, or is it mostly just these are the rules, follow the rules for combat? And
in Germany, you have the what do we say Drachenfest in the US? The
consent?
No, the what you see is what you get.
Oh yeah, exactly what you said. What you see is what you get.
It's more complicated in German. A lot of events have that. It's like you like if you can show it, it's then you can like then it happens. Like it's all about the immersive. So we have lots of duels, lots of like this infighting, like in Israel, where you do theatrical fighting and stuff like that. Big battles are a bit different, but most people try to, like, if they get hit, in Germany and on the Drachenfest we have a rule system with hit points. From experience, I can say a lot of people just play with what you see is what you get. So if they get hit in the torso, and they still have hit points actually, they may just play out that it was a fatal hit and then just fall and try to get out of the way. But if they get like 3 hits on the arm, they just may continue fighting with the other arm, because in reality, you would still be able to fight.
that's it. Yeah, you just stop using
That arm. Yes.
Yeah, which doesn't necessarily always fit in with like health point rules and just all that. But yeah, I like that type of style of game as well. That's my personal preference.
Mine too.
I don't really do combat that much actually in games. I am a little bit of a weenie, so.
Yeah, well, like I like to watch.
Yeah.
Maybe even in the middle, like really doing tourism, like going inside the battlefield and watching, but I don't really like fighting.
I fight with unconventionals, so like frying pans, bread, broomsticks. Those are like my weapons of choice.
Another thing I'm kind of curious about is sign-ins, sign-outs, registration. A lot of things are online now. I know in Quebec, some LARPs are trying to like pioneer into, for instance, like using apps and things like that for sign-in and whatnot. A lot are still using paper and pen, and that's it. Have you guys seen anything that is easier or maybe harder? Because I know paper and pen tends to be time intensive and kind of tricky to get all the players?
I think I've seen it kind of like across way different of like super effective and super optimized and like totally not. When I was younger, I used to be a marshal at Dystopia Rising, and they had like a whole system where you would go in, you'd give your name, and then they would look you up on a computer, they would print out your sheet, they would stamp it, then they would give it to you, and you had to go to another table where they'd give you items. It was like a whole like conveyor belt system line, and it was it took forever. And but then like modern games, so there's a game that I've attended, and I think you guys may have attended Damarong and Malleus, where everything's done online. So you pay online, and then you just like go to the desk. They have a checklist. They check you, and they check your ID and your vaccination. That's it. And then there are some that have gone so far where it's like an app, where it's like you just literally you go there with a QR code and like that's it. I think that's the most efficient I've ever seen it.
Yeah, Drachenfest Germany, for example, you buy the ticket online, you have the ticket either printed out or on your phone, and I'm mostly the person that will check you in if you drive up the driveway and sit there like for 2 to 3 days in a row, from the morning 8 to in the evening almost 12, and
Wow.
yeah, we just scan the tickets, and then you get an envelope with your character pass in it.
Yep.
And you drive to your site, and there you can you can fill out your character pass, and if you have like something special, you just go to the referee tent and get it. But yeah,
I would say like universally, like all over the world, from what I've seen, everyone's basically at the same level of like they have a laptop, they have a printed out list, they check you off, you go to the game, maybe get like a bag or something or a packet, like you said. So that's kind of like what I've seen more or less universally in the last couple of years.
Another thing I'm curious about, particularly toward you that have been to LARPs all over the world, costuming. Have you what have you noticed in terms of levels of costuming, levels of decorum, costuming, and just the accessories, things around in camps and stuff like that?
So there's been a massive shift in like the last 6 years because it used to be way harder to find like the costuming for LARP overall. Like it used to be way more niche than it was, and also like I know companies like Amazon and like Medieval Collectibles, Calimacil, like all these different companies now actively producing way more garb has made it way more accessible for people to get that. So I've seen that like even countries where LARP isn't as widely developed, like Australia, their kits are still like up here because they have access to like Epic Armory, Calimacil, Mythalon, and they're able to make their costumes look really good on a relatively easy budget. I find that the U.S. kind of has a rough reputation in regards to costuming, and I think that's because yes, we have had wizards in bathrobes. It's true, but I would say nowadays like the baseline costuming overall, like again across the world, has just gone up because things have become more accessible. Even making a Amazon costume is easier to make look good than it was even 5-10 years ago. I had to get my first costume off of eBay and pray that it fit okay. And now I can get a stunning dress on Etsy within 2 weeks. So it's a little bit different than it used to be. So I would say like also decorum matters like logistically where the country is. So like in Europe, it's a little bit easier for people to get like period tents and things like that. Castles. But like in Israel, one thing that I admired them for was that so they can't get access to medieval tents there. It's too expensive. They can't. Nobody can ship it to them. The import fees are way too high.
Yeah, because shipping is an issue over there.
Crazy. So they make them. They literally just make their medieval tents. And so at the LARP I was at, they had 3, and it took like people 4 months to make each tent, and I was like, that's so incredible to me.
Impressive.
It's really impressive, and like in the U.S., it's it's become more easy to get like canvas tents, medieval tents. So decorum is thankfully across the board, kind of like raising up slowly but surely.
And Germany being one of the immersive
Capitals.
pioneers, like pushing in terms of like high decorum and things like that. When did the shift happen? Do you remember? Can you remember a time that it wasn't?
It didn't always look beautiful.
Well, no, like in 2003, I actually started with nowadays LARP, not with medieval LARP. I started that a year later, but actually it was already really high in 2004, like compared to the U.S. anyway.
That's fine.
And yeah, well, the Germans' impression of the U.S. LARP is always like also a bit behind, because you have movies like what is that?
Oh, like Grown-Ups
and stuff like that.
Yeah, Grown-Ups.
Where they see that and then they're shitting on U.S. costumes.
Yeah. Well, we don't even look like that anymore. Okay. Like,
Well,
it's
but
been 20 years.
First truth.
Yeah.
First truth.
First truth. That's true.
But like since I was from Canada and back and forth, I knew that they were coming along. So, but Germany was basically always. I think it's also in the nature of Germans, because they're a bit perfectionism, that they try to really make good costumes and immersive costumes and lots of layers. The only kind of shitty costumes that I had was in the nowadays LARP and not in the medieval one.
Like a modern era
Yeah.
LARP. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
Lower bar to entry though, because it's like modern day.
Yeah, but otherwise the medieval one was, they had all cotton tents, medieval tents at that time. Also because there's like in the Netherlands, there's a modern tent producer who makes tents in a style that works for medieval fantasy. So lots of went and bought their tent there. It's called Sahara. The tent that they mostly use, and it's cheap, so that's easy entry.
Accessible, yeah, it's really accessible.
Yeah,
it's all about accessibility.
Yeah.
Like that's all what it comes down to, you know.
Yeah, and yeah, I was surprised actually. When I went 2018 the first time to Bickelin, I didn't know what to expect from Canadian LARP, and I was actually surprised of the level of the costume, because it was really immersive and really great, and layers, and they even lots of people had like authentic fabric, like linen and wool and stuff. So I was really like surprised, positively surprised, because I didn't know what to expect when the first time I went to Bickelin.
Awesome. Well, I'm very happy that we made a good impression on you. Do we have any questions from the public? Because we've been talking for a bit. Yes. Do we have a microphone that we could bring, perhaps?
Yes, we do. They're on the job.
I was just, okay, I just couldn't see it. Right behind you, Linda.
Oh, they're turning
Oh,
it on.
okay, they're turning it on.
Oh no.
Oh, if you can just bring it to,
Yes, so we talked about the temp aspect of the forum. I know it's an issue that was brought to the Fédération des Grands Nature. I don't know if you can.
yeah, the Quebec LARP Federation.
Yeah, that we addressed, and we made a guide that we put online for real LARPers from Quebec. But there's really specific laws about tents in Canada, and I was wondering if across the world there are those kind of tents, because I understand that in Germany you can buy tents from the Netherlands, but here tents that are not made from Canada, or having done the research across many sites of tents across the world, I like one that I can say that respects the law. So I was wondering if across the world this kind of regulations.
At least in the U.S., there's no such regulations like that. It's like if you get a tent from wherever you can get it from. I mean, that shipping may be crazy, but if you can get it, if you pay for it, it's yours. But across the world, like I said in Israel, it's harder for them just to get tents in general. Like they can't even buy something from Denmark. It's just too expensive to import it, and the import taxes are insane. But I mean, I'm sure in Europe, you guys have tent manufacturers that all the countries can kind of like buy from without issue within the EU, right?
Thinking about it realistic, most tents, like if they're really medieval tents, they come from India. they're being produced in India and then shipped to Germany or also the US.
Yep.
So if you want the most affordable medieval tents, like you always have in the country yourself, like people who use the canvas and then sew a tent and make like wooden poles. But if it's like mostly metal poles and funny smelling canvas, it's probably it's probably
I like that.
They're great. But you notice a quality difference between like a canvas that is produced here, a water repellent one, or if it's in India. But I used to have a double wedge tent from India because it was cheaper and I liked it. It was great.
Yeah, so as far as I know, I guess, unfortunately, Canada must be one of the only places, at least that I know of, that has such strict regulations around that, which is something I learned today. I did not know that.
Is it just Quebec that has this regulation?
No, it's Canada.
It's Canada?
Wow.
So you're not allowed to have a tent from?
You can have them, but insurance-wise, it's mostly for the people hosting the LARP.
Yeah.
Their insurance may not accept those tents because they don't follow the laws, and if an accident happens, the insurance won't cover somebody that burned in a tent because it was not under the laws of Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, LARPs in Quebec, it's tricky to find insurance and...
Same in the U.S. actually.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Oh, now it's becoming a little bit easier because LARPs, like in order for a LARP to exist in the U.S., it has to be a business. It has to be a corporation, it has to be some type of LLC, limited liability, whatever. It has to be one of those. It's becoming easier now because it's becoming more recognized, but back in the day it used to be, I mean, there would just be events that would just run off the seat of their pants with no insurance, but nowadays most events have even, they've been able to actually develop so far to get like alcohol insurance and like all sorts of like liability things now, so I guess they're protected.
Well, small LARPs are mostly privately run in Germany. Like it's a
Same here.
Small little organization. Most of them don't really get insurance. Like if they have only 100 players or something, they probably don't have insurance in Germany. But most people in Germany have health insurance because it's public health insurance, and most people in Germany also have a liability, like a personal liability insurance. So if I would hit you with my weapon and something would happen, my insurance would probably pay for it.
Wow. If only.
Yeah, you guys I can only dream.
So like a lot of little LARPs don't have insurance. Naturally, the Drachenfest does have insurance. We also have to fulfill laws, like we have to have a whole security concept for the event where all the emergency exits from the site are, although we're outside, where we have to have like every few hundred meters, we have to have like 5 meters no tents so to stop fires from spreading. So we have to calculate it in planning the site and everything, and so tents don't necessarily have to have like a
flame like retardant canvas.
Yeah, but most of them actually do.
Like flame retardants and
Yeah.
But we also have to have like fire extinguishers on certain spots. So we did have a fire this year on the Drachenfest.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was a gas fridge in a tent caught fire because they work with a little flame inside.
Oh.
And it stood too close to the back to the canvas, so it was a lot of smoke. It like everybody knew where the fire extinguishers were. People need to have a fire extinguisher at their site, like their own one, when they have a fire. So if you cook in your camp, you also have to have a fire extinguisher.
Smart. That makes sense. That's a good idea.
It's a rule.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
we should do that.
So we basically had like immediately 6 people were there with a fire extinguisher.
Okay, great.
And nothing happened and everything.
It wasn't like the burning of London.
No.
Okay, great.
It was more smoke. It was more smoke than anything else. But yes.
I'm glad nobody was hurt.
But that's why we have like a security concept and a whole document about it, and yeah.
Wow.
Hard work.
Yeah, I'll bet. Do we have any other questions? Yes. Do we have the microphone too far away? Yeah.
All right, thank you. So Earlier, you all mentioned that it's become more accessible to get access to various costume pieces. I was curious, you mentioned layering already, but other methods that you would recommend to people trying to get access to decent costumes, and then weathering techniques that they could utilize to keep things decorum, even if they might not have the ability to pay for the right material or the right layering outfits, just like simple, accessible ways to make costumes look good for a limited budget.
So really, in all my years, I have realized even if I get a costume off of Amazon, which I have, most of the costumes I wore at Villa Historia a couple weeks ago were off of Amazon. Really, what makes a costume look good is its fit. So if you can take it to somebody, or you yourself can take it in and make it fit right, make it look like it fits you, like it was almost custom made, that will already level up the costume's appearance because it's fitted to you and it looks like it was made for you. So fit is one of the most important things. Otherwise, I would say that all costuming is the visualization of what you're trying to say with the character. Are you trying to be scary? Are you trying to communicate something? You use color, you use shape, you use silhouette to do so. So for instance, if you wanted to be scary, I mean, of course you could subvert this, but you could have a massive silhouette with like shoulder pads. Like you could just make whatever jacket or cloak you have bigger by putting shoulder pads in it, or by changing the way that you hold yourself with, having a couple of cloaks or doing makeup on your face. Really, what makes a good costume isn't just the layering, it isn't just the pieces. It's what makes sense for the character. It is what makes it look cohesive. And color is majority the highest battle with that. Like when I played Giselle at Bico this year when I went with Calimacil, Giselle was also made last minute with stuff with Amazon, and it was all about the fit and the colors. I knew I was gonna have blue eyes, so I had blue accents in my costume to bring out my eyes. It's little details like that even though you don't have this most super detailed embroidered costume, people may still look at you and go, wow, that's a good fit.
And to add on that, something that I find helps me when, since forever, is looking up images,
yep.
Finding inspiration and not sticking only to the specific genre of exactly what you want, but letting yourself kind of rabbit hole into other directions, because sometimes you will land on something that will give you a really great idea for a piece that you have in your wardrobe already, that all you have to do is add a little bit of this, or you have something that's old that you're you don't really wear that much anymore, and you're wait, I could modify that easily just by cutting this, or I could wear that and lay as an underlayer of this other thing. But you wouldn't have thought of it with only the genre-specific images from Pinterest, for instance.
100% true.
And so taking at least a bit of time to do that first, I find helps me get an idea of the vibe of costume that I want. Obviously, wanting something extremely specific when you're on a very tight budget is not ideal. So you want to be flexible.
Yeah.
And something that's now this particular tip is more time intensive, but going to thrift stores and kind of just
that's big.
Looking around, and you have to actually spend time there, and you have to go more than once usually because you might go once and you don't find a single thing. You might go the next time and you find 5 things. So you have to kind of go periodically, and not only when you need a costume specifically. And obviously it's more intensive in terms of time and effort, but that's also an avenue for instance, finding pieces that are not too hard to modify, even though you don't necessarily sew yourself or things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I always make a Pinterest board if I have a character idea. I love creating characters. I go down rabbit holes because then I see something from a costume. Maybe it's even more modern day or apocalypse, but it would still fill the fantasy medieval setting that I want the character to live in. So I love Pinterest boards because it really helps, and it gives you ideas what you could do and what you can take from it. And really, for me, it's all about the layering. I love to craft, so I sew most of my costumes myself, or the character I play now mostly is a wildling witch, so she has lots of leather.
It's cool.
So I actually just go to a leather store and they sell like rest leathers in kilograms, and I just sew the parts like patchwork together.
Yeah, and sometimes like remnants and stuff,
Yeah.
like they're cheap as dirt. Like
Yeah.
it's so inexpensive.
And you don't even need to really know how to sew with leather. You can just like punch holes and then sew it together roughly, and it will, if you want something in a wildling vibe or rogue vibe, it will fulfill it. If you just want to be an elegant lady, it probably won't look good. And it's all about the accessories, like little things like a belt with stuff hanging about, makes like even the most simple costume worth more. Like if you just can afford a tunic and maybe a brown jogging pants, and then have a belt and something to hide your shoes, it's
an excellent starting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just another thing that I find helps a lot is just little like accessories, little things that will add to your costume. Like, I mean, obviously, like you'll have the belt and the pouch, but you can go into like other directions that, again, like rabbit holing on Pinterest can give you ideas for accessories that end up being like something that ends up being a key piece for your character, but you never would have thought of it.
So
and
true.
it costs you, I don't know, $2 on AliExpress if you're willing to wait for the show.
Yeah.
Found it in grandma's jewelry chest.
Exactly. There's stuff that there's pieces that I've worn that, that are like secondhand pieces from my grandmother.
And
so
like,
it's an excellent example.
I also encourage people not to be afraid of being a little anachronistic, because here's the thing, like nobody was in ancient Rome, all right? Like none of us were there. I'm pretty sure none of us are immortal beings. So like, it's all right if it's not perfect. I think people also have to allow themselves the wiggle room to grow and also to like upgrade their own kit. It doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning. Mine have never been, And
Mine either. Like,
yeah.
When I first bring in a character, it's never the end
A
costume.
character is never finished, basically.
Yeah.
Like most LARP characters, you go to an event and then you maybe see something on somebody else's outfit and like, oh, I kind of like that. I'm gonna try to like make something similar from my outfit. And next time you look totally different. I think my wildling started with a leather dress that I made. Like LARPers have one problem. They have a motivation problem before they have a time problem. So basically, as soon as you're like 2 days before the event, you start your project.
Pain.
And it
You
happened
don't
to me
sleep.
almost every time. Like my wildling character started out like that. Somebody invited me to a LARP. It was 2 weeks away. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to make something. And 2 days before, it was like 2 all-nighters until I had it finished. And it was basically just a leather dress. And and now it's like a leather belt and a little top and like fur attached to it from jackets that I found on flea markets.
Yeah,
and ripped apart.
secondhand
Yeah.
coats for leather and
great.
secondhand fur. Yeah.
You can get them
great.
cheap, have a cheap and awesome costume, and everybody will say, "Oh, your costume looks so great."
Yeah, that's really the key. It's like it's also understanding, like I said earlier, your silhouettes. So even if it's generic fantasy, wear something that suits you. If you know what fit looks good on you, go for it. Exemplify that. It doesn't have to be this super historically accurate fantasy piece. It depends on the game. There's wiggle room, but even for Malleus, which is based in a relatively narrowed down time period of like the 16th to 17th century. My costume is basically a glorified Oktoberfest costume that's been custom made, but really what makes it look appropriate is the stays I wear underneath to give me that like flat front. And so like sometimes even the outfit itself can be anachronistic as long as your undergarments can provide the correct silhouette for the time period.
One last thing for that too is if you can find a good-looking hat.
Oh yes. Hat.
No matter what the rest of your costume looks like, or almost, if you have an awesome hat, you're probably gonna pull the costume off.
I learned that at Bico this year because Giselle had this. I had this like flat, like 18th century hat, and everybody was like, "Where'd you get this hat?" I love the hat, and I also love the hat. I've been wearing it everywhere since. So
if there's
hat.
one item I suggest to splurge on, it's a hat.
Good hat.
Do we have any other questions in the audience?
Maybe it's a big question for you, girl. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you to be there. It's very cool for first that to see girl talk about weapons and fighting.
Oh.
That's so good.
I agree.
What do you expect for the future, for the LARP, for the next couple of years? what your hopes are. So it's a big question.
That is it. Yeah. Well, yeah. That.
If I can start out maybe, in Quebec, something that I hope to see more and more of, I'm already seeing it, but I'm hoping to see it even more, is the play to lift concept, which for those who maybe don't know what it is, and it's playing not to win or not to for your own pleasure, but playing for others' pleasure as well. It's a two-way street. If you want others to have fun, chances are you're going to end up having fun too. And when you start playing like that, often it becomes infectious. And I hope to see that just spread like wildfire in Quebec, personally. That's
the concept of the Drachenfest. Like, you play for the scene, so everybody has fun. And that's like what the intention of bringing Drachenfest to the US was also to bring like something like that.
Mentality-wise.
The mentality, this play to lift, to be happy with what, like, if I would play with you, be happy with the reaction you give me, and not expect a certain reaction and then be disappointed, because like I can't look into your head. I don't know how you're going to react to what I'm going to offer you. So that's a mentality that like was behind bringing the Drachenfest to the US. And yeah.
What I'm hoping for the future is that, like, listen, in 10 years, there's been a lot of changes. When I came into the scene 10 years ago, especially as like a young, because I'm 26, so I started at 16. It was kind of a nightmare. And in the last 10 years, there has been an absolute rapid amount of growth, basically worldwide, but especially in the United States. I couldn't be more proud to see where we've been to where we are, and I'm hoping that trend continues. I'm hoping that, you know, more LARPs become accessible to people of color, people that have different financial means. You know, I'm hoping that
disabilities.
Disabilities. I'm hoping that overall, like, the bar of entry gets lower. You know, I hope that we see elitism, which is in every community, but I hope that mentality will begin to fade, because I believe that everybody has the potential to be a great LARPer. I'm hoping that LARP in the US will finally be recognized more as an art than just a sport or just a game, because it's not just a game. It's not just boffer. It's not just fighting. It's an art form. People practice for years. They devote their lives to becoming a good LARPer, because it's a skill. So I'm hoping that in the future that will become a more widely understood thing in the, you know, American market, and because it's really understood elsewhere, just not at home. And so I'm hoping that we get better about that, because truly when LARPers, you know, come and they say, because I actually just got a post about this yesterday where a LARPer was like, hey, how can I be better? Like, not saying that I did bad, but I want to improve my skills. And that's the thing, LARP is a skill. So I'm hoping that the skill of everybody is recognized and just keeps going up from where it is.
All right, well, Raquel, Rissa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
It was a great talk. I think I learned some stuff here, and I hope to get to learn more in the future. And one thing that I'm really happy about is LARPs no longer being only local, but spreading out.
Yeah.
So I hope to see you guys a lot more in the future too.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everybody who's here.
Happy LARPing! Oh, wonderful. Are we still rolling?
I don't know.
Are we?
Alors, je voudrais sur ces derniers mots vous dire un très chaleureux remerciement à tout le monde qui ont participé, à nos visiteurs, à nos fans sur Facebook, sur YouTube, sur Live, à nos collaborateurs à l'extérieur du pays qui nous ont fait des beaux vidéos d'introduction, des clins d'œil, et ici présents à tous nos partenaires qui nous ont accueillis, qui nous ont épaulés pour toute la journée, qui ont mis des activités et avec qui on adore échanger. Donc, sur ces mots, je vous laisse avec ces charmantes dames qui vont vous faire un dernier petit clin d'œil et mot de au revoir.
So thank you to everyone who came on site, everybody who watched during the day. Thank you to our partners. Thank you to our visitors. Thank you to the people from all over the world who have sent in videos and comments. We really, really appreciate you. It was a great day here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, and thanks for watching.
So that is pretty much it. We are wrapping up the Calicon for this year. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope we will see you again next year. Bye.
See you in 2023.